This month, sailing around the world can take its toll on even the toughest race-hardened sailors. When the relentless pressure stops and the goal is achieved, the emotion pours out. Thomas Coville had set an incredible new record, but some aren't so fortunate, especially in the Vendée Globe.
Vendée Globe.
Plus, the Aon Youth Worlds delivered a snapshot of tomorrow's future stars. But who are they? We found out in Auckland.
It feels so good.
Meanwhile, in Australia, a major record tumbled in one of the world's classic offshore races.
It's the stuff that dreams are made of.
It's been described as the greatest sailing achievement in a decade. Others go further and rate the new world record for a non-stop circumnavigation as being one of the greatest in sailing, full stop. Having crossed the finishing line off the west coast of France on Christmas Day, Thomas Coville hadn't just bettered the existing world record, he demolished it. Completing the 28,000-mile trip in a shade over 49 days, he'd slashed more than 8 days off the original time. And when Coville arrived back in France on Boxing Day, his achievement was clearly an emotional one too. This was his 5th attempt at setting a new solo record. And on the 2 occasions when he did complete the course, both had fallen short of the record. But this time, he'd smashed it. The story of the fastest solo sailors around the world starts in 1969, when Sir Robin Knox-Johnston was the first to complete the non-stop single-handed Golden Globe race. He took 313 days. American Dodge Morgan reduced it to 150 in 1986. But it was the Vendée Globe race, a modern-day version of the Golden Globe, that was to be the catalyst for new solo records over the next decade. Between 1990 and 2001, a new time was set in all 3 races. Until 2004, when France's Joyon set off in a trimaran, challenging the popular belief that multi-hulls were unsafe and unsuitable for such ventures. 72 days later, he proved the world wrong while slicing 21 days off the previous best. The following year, Ellen MacArthur took more than a day off his time to finish in 71 days. 3 years later, Joyon was back and took a large chunk out of the record once again, this time finishing in 57 days. Few believed that there was more to be squeezed out of the time. So far, only 2 people had dared to attempt the record in a trimaran. Coville was the 3rd, convinced he could better the pace. And on this, his 5th attempt, he did it, completing the trip in just over 15% of the time Knox-Johnston had taken 47 years before. Coville's trip started well as he charged south through the Atlantic, reaching the equator in just under 6 days. Woo-hoo! On day 14, he'd passed the Cape of Good Hope, setting a new record from Ushant to Cape Lewin in the process. Another record tumbled with a blistering passage across the Indian Ocean, which he crossed in 8.5 days, a day faster than Joyon. The Pacific Ocean received the same treatment as Coville completed this part of the trip in just under 9 days, almost 2 days quicker than Joyon. From there, he was around Cape Horn and 4 days ahead of the record pace. Next was the battle northwards towards the windless doldrums that have derailed many a record campaign. But Coville barely stopped. As he approached the finish, the emotion came pouring out.
C'est génial. Merci. C'est un super cadeau là de me faire ça. Je suis très ému de vous avoir.
Even he couldn't quite believe what he had achieved.
Fait le tour du monde avec saut des beaux. Et évidemment, je leur dédie ce record, mais au-delà du record, la manière dont on l'a fait, la manière dont on l'a construit, la manière dont on a travaillé pour y arriver avec toute cette équipe fabuleuse. Voilà. incroyable. Des années de travail pour arriver à ça. Des années. C'est fantastique.
Thousands felt the same way and lined the dockside, ready to greet him and celebrate his incredible achievement. But even more impressive is that Coville's solo record is only 4 days off the record for a fully crewed boat. A record that's being challenged by IDEC Sport and skippered by Francis Joyon. For some people, being the fastest once is just not enough. A World Championships in any class is a big deal. But a Youth World Championships provides a snapshot of tomorrow's potential star sailors. And at the Aon Youth Sailing World Championships in Auckland, there was no shortage of new talent. 389 competitors from 65 nations racing in 9 classes. The Youth Worlds was a big hit. Auckland was also the debut for the NACRA 15, a high-performance cat that will act as a feeder into the Olympic NACRA 17. The new boat is the second high-performance machine in the youth fleet, joining the 29er. In fact, the first gold medal of the event was won in the 29er class as British sailors Crispin Beaumont and Tom Darling held their nerve against their French opponents to win by just 3 points.
We'd been in the position before, we'd battled against the same boat at the Europeans 2 years ago, and it's kind of the same situation, and this time we made it work for ourselves and came out on top.
In the girls' class, it was a different story, as Australians Natasha Bryant and Annie Wilmot won their gold with a day to spare. There was an equally dominant performance in the NACRA class as Tim Morniac and Charles d'Orange from France took gold with ease, never finishing worse than third. The RSX fleets showed similar performances, with Great Britain's Emma Wilson winning the girls' division with a day to spare, as did Yoav Omer from Israel in the boys' class. The winning margin for Polish sailors Julia Schmidt and Hannah Zeek in the girls' 420 wasn't quite so large, yet their performance all week had shown consistency.
Yeah, we are winners for the second time, and we're so happy. We did it, we did our best, and all the competitors were so good. It was so difficult to win, but now we are so happy.
It was a very different story, however, in the boys' 420 class, where American sailors Wiley Rogers and Jack Parkin won by just a single point against Israeli sailors Ido Bilik and Ofek Shalgi.
World champs.
And finally, in the girls' laser radio class, it was Olympian Dolores Moreira Frashini from Uruguay that took gold in a close 3-way battle at the top.
It felt awesome. Still right now it just feels amazing, and I'm really happy that I am here representing my country and that I could live my country in the top of the charts.
In the boys' division, Australian Finian Alexander had the front of the fleet more to himself, racking up 4 wins from 9 races.
It feels so good. It was a really hard final race, but to be able to come away with a win overall is so good. It's something that I've been working towards for the best part of 3 years, so to be able to do it and finally come through the win, which is so good.
But there was one award that showed real dominance, that of the Nations Trophy, where the Italian sailing team took the top spot for the 3rd time. Being top nation at a World Championships was impressive, but scoring a hat-trick was clearly a big deal too. After the break, how stress can be about make or break. Plus 60 seconds with the president. But first, Olympic 49ers are underweight, overpowered, and notoriously difficult to handle. Regular practice is essential, but sometimes the training is a battle between boat and crew, where the crew don't always win. Find out why in part 2. Marco Grail and his crew Gabriel Borge were training for the Sailing World Cup in Hyères last year. A forecast for strong winds meant an opportunity for some heavy airs practice. With 25 knots of wind, they knew they would be on the limit. But when the breeze increased even further, it was time to head back home. But when a 27-knot gust hit them and the wind direction changed, there was no way out. Sailing single-handed around the world is stressful. Even before they sign up, all the Vendée Globe race skippers know that they will have to deal with long periods of stress. But what is not clear is where that stress will come from. At the front of the fleet, with just 3,000 miles of the 24,000-mile course to go, race leader Cleac'h was feeling the heat as he slowed up in the doldrums, while his closest rival, Alex Thompson, stormed up from behind. Just 3 weeks before, the Frenchman had been over 800 miles ahead. But even under pressure, Cleac'h still had a small celebration.
Pour le passage de l'équateur, trinquons avec Neptune. Ah, il a un peu chaud. La dernière fois qu'on était passé là, c'était le 16 novembre dernier. Donc de nouveau, la tête à l'endroit, l'hémisphère nord. Ça fait du bien, ça marque voilà, la dernière ligne droite vers les Sables d'Olonne. Mais la météo n'est pas simple jusque-là.
But now Thompson was less than 80 miles behind, neck and neck in anybody's language. Despite being the hunter, Thompson was also feeling the pressure as he struggled through the windless doldrums.
Had a terrible night last night. I actually felt like I did 1 or 2 knots for most of the night and into this morning, but today's not been too bad. There's been some wind that wasn't expected and I'm currently going pretty fast, which is good, although I'm on port tack, as you can see. So hopefully this will last for a while, but there's definitely going to be another slowdown before we get the northeasterly or the easterly breeze that's going to come in after the doldrums. So it's not all plain sailing at the moment. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it won't be as painful the next 24 hours as the models suggest. Fingers crossed.
Behind Thompson, third place Jeremy Bayou was also playing catch-up as he took 500 miles out of the leader's margin. He too was anxious about what lay ahead.
La nuit a été compliquée. Au-dessus de moi, j'ai vu bourgeonner des nuages de partout. Et puis pour finir par m'arrêter, là, il y a quelques heures, complètement, j'avais plus du tout de vent. Donc, passage pas très cool, ouais. Maintenant, effectivement, j'espère que c'est qu'une ligne de terrain, c'est pas le poteau noir qui est en train de se mettre là et de monter avec moi. Si le poteau noir se passe bien pour moi, voilà, il peut se passer des choses après sur la remontée, il y a encore de la distance.
For others, the pressure was more serious, and for one, life-threatening. Deep in the Southern Ocean, beyond the reach of any rescue, Thomas Royan had been dealing with such a crisis.
Les dégâts à l'avant du bateau se dégradent. J'ai la coque qui est en train de s'ouvrir, les varangues qui se décollent de partout. Et du coup, j'essaye de faire route là sur le sud de la Nouvelle-Zélande. Voilà, je pense qu'on est pour 2 jours. Je suis pas sûr que tout ça tienne jusque là. Voilà, ce qui est bien, c'est que je suis à portée d'hélico. Donc ça c'est assez rassurant. J'ai juste à appuyer sur un bouton et on vient me chercher. En tout cas, ouais, le choc là, ça a été ultra violent. J'ai encore des frissons, rien que d'y repenser et d'en parler. J'étais à 17-18 nœuds et je me suis arrêté, je pense, sur un conteneur. C'est ça qui a déchiré le fond de coque et qui a explosé tout l'avant du bateau. Le bateau s'est plié, quoi. Mais par chance, j'ai pas dématé. C'était vraiment très violent. Fin de Vendée Globe. Terminé. Ouais, une moitié de tour du monde quoi. Mais... Voilà, puisque je suis déçu là de terminer. Ça se termine de cette façon-là. J'en ai eu des galères. Hein. J'ai eu mon lot de galères. Alors celle-là, celle-là, je la souhaite vraiment à personne.
When it comes to the Vendée Globe, win or lose, the stress is always there.
My name is Kim Andersen and I'm the president of World Sailing. My sailing career started when I was 12 years old, and it started in a local dinghy called the Flipper. Right now for Tokyo, the 10 medals they are fixed, and the classes and the equipment used for those 10, they are also basically fixed. Of course, when you're looking ahead for 2024, then it's a different ball game, and then we can look at the total venue as a whole and decide how to present our sport. Paralympic is part of our Olympic sailing, so it's not a matter if they're in and out, they're part of us, and they should never have been out in the first place. I think we have a very, very good chance of getting the Paralympics in if we continue to focus and work the way we are doing it.
It's one of the world's classic offshore races. But while it might be the middle of summer down under, the 600-mile race from Sydney to Hobart has a tough reputation for being a punishing experience and is rarely a walk in the park. Some aim simply to complete the race, others look to win it. And a handful are hell-bent on setting a new race record. Few succeed. Starting on Boxing Day from the heart of Sydney's busy harbour, the race is also famous for drawing large crowds. Once out into open water, the 88-boat fleet turns south for the drag race to Hobart, which takes them across the infamous Bass Strait. And while conditions didn't indicate it at first, this year's weather forecast suggested plenty of changes and challenges later on. Welcome news for Anthony Bell's 100-foot Perpetual Loyal, one of the most potent boats in the fleet.
I think a record will be broken. It'll be interesting. It'll be about the conditions, but it'll also be about the crews who sail the boat best.
Paul Clitheroe won last year's race on corrected time to take the prestigious Tattersalls Cup and was in no doubt as to how hard it would be to repeat his success.
I think to win it again would be a major challenge. No boats won it twice in a row for nearly half a century, and to be quite blunt with you, a heavy downwind forecast is probably not our fastest sailing. So the good news is we'll get there really quickly. My expectation, we'll buy the winner a beer in the pub and pass the trophy over, but believe me, we'll be doing our damnedest to win it twice.
Just 1.5 days later, the first of the two predictions had materialised. At 2:31 in the morning, Anthony Bell's Perpetual Loyal crossed the finish line in Hobart to take almost 5 hours off the previous record. The win was a big one for owner and crew, after having been forced to retire from the previous two races. This year's star crew lineup had included Olympic gold medalist Tom Slingsby. They'd led the field from the off, relinquishing the lead briefly to previous record holder Wild Oats 11 before taking pole position back after Oates was forced to retire following structural problems. Well aware of the record potential, the crew pushed hard with speeds topping 30 knots at times. Anthony Bell is no stranger to the podium, having taken line honours in 2011, but it was clear that setting a new course record was particularly special to him and his crew.
Yeah, I always thought something like that could happen, special for the boat. We needed conditions. They weren't completely the best conditions for this boat, but we just managed to get the best out of it for the things that we were good at, which is the power reaching.
If the rest of the fleet were looking to replicate Bell's blistering run all the way into Hobart in their quest for overall victory on corrected time, they were to be disappointed. The approach to the finish up the River Derwent is notoriously tricky, as the wind can often switch off. Just 3 hours earlier, Perpetual Loyal had sailed up the same stretch of water in plenty of breeze. But now a total shutdown saw many of the top contenders becalmed within striking distance of the finish. As the clock counted down, time ran out for the front runners. This left the Volvo 70, Giacomo, that had been the second boat to cross the line when there had been wind, sitting at the top of the leaderboard. Despite an anxious wait for her owner, Jim DeLatte and crew, none of the smaller boats were able to better her corrected time.
Well, winning this is it's the stuff that dreams are made of, and in many ways it's a reward for a long learning experience. And of course, the crew are made up of family. I have my 20-year-old son Nicholas, I have my 18-year-old son James. Both are experienced for their ages and are fearless sailors, and it's an all New Zealand boat, so we're very proud of that.
In an extraordinary Southern Hemisphere season that has seen many major records tumble, the Rolex Sydney-Hobart proved once again why it's such a prestigious and classic race. Next month, has another new record been set? In an incredible 4 months, some of the world's toughest records have been smashed. We look at how Francis Joyon's team took on the world in their quest for the ultimate sailing record. Plus, a new race record in the Vendée Globe. Alex Thompson and Armel Leclerc took their 24,000-mile battle down to the wire. But how did the winner pull it off?